An estimated 10,000 websites go dark and more than 7 million Americans sign a petition to resist the Stop Online Piracy Act and the Protect Intellectual Property Act in Congress. So, what do SOPA and PIPA mean for online content? I'm Allen Barton. Stand by for Front Page. Joining me in studio, Don Watkins, an analyst at the Ayn Rand Center for Individual Rights, and Terry Jones, associate editor for Investors Business Daily. All right, Harry Reid said Friday that he would postpone the vote on the Senate bill indefinitely until the legitimate issues raised by many can be resolved, and apparently the House is following suit in delaying a vote on this. So, Terry, it's a complicated issue here. It brings up a lot of interesting things to talk about. But why don't we start with the sort of the 101 level, like, what did it do, and why are people so upset?
Well, at the very simplest level, what it sought to do was to make each and every website a policeman, basically, for copyrighted material on the web. And anything that appeared on your website, and let's face it, a lot of websites have a lot of reader content on them, so it's very difficult to monitor all that. You would have been responsible for that. And not only would you have been responsible for it, but a third party could come in, file a complaint against you, and the government could, in essence, shut you down without any due process whatsoever, and you would be deprived of the use of your property.
Yeah, and basically I think people were freaked out because YouTube, obviously, could easily be shut down. Someone posts a video that happens to have a TV in the background that's showing an episode of Cheers, and NBC complains, hey, our copyright's being violated, these people aren't paying royalties on this episode of Cheers. They go to YouTube and say, you shut down your whole site. And so people were, I think, legitimately freaked out about it. But it does, Don, I'll bring up an interesting issue of intellectual property and copyright issues in the internet age, and whether this is this an appropriate role for government to try to figure this out, and how does a free marketplace try to deal with mass media and instant distribution?
Yeah, well, I think this is a complex issue in part because the law is complex. I mean, I've talked to a friend of mine who's an expert in intellectual property, and what he says is that, in fact, a lot of these concerns are not legitimate. The biggest concern is that there's certain things in the law that are vague and that would have to be solved. So I think, just speaking in broad terms, free speech is an absolute thing that the government needs to protect, but so are intellectual property rights, and there's been a real failure to secure them in this realm.
Yeah, and the internet is where free speech and intellectual property converge in a seamless way, and very difficult to pull them apart and say, okay, this is protected, this is free speech, and the idea that someone who comments on a blog and quotes something that is copyright protected and the whole blog gets shut down, problematic. But the issue of intellectual property is a really tough one because the music industry is behind this. The Motion Picture Academy, huge sponsors of this, because they're seeing their income hit horribly, and the income of individual artists that are part of those communities hit horribly. You go to China, you can buy DVDs of American movies for 15 cents.
Yeah, I mean, just the key thing is that there has been a failure to protect these rights. Something needs to be done to, update the laws regarding IP, but there needs to be a real clear understanding of what does this law really mean, and does it protect everybody's rights, including free speech rights? And it has to protect IP rights as well.
So what do you see in terms of how this goes forward? I mean, it seems as though it's a very complicated issue, and then you have a lot of, people adjudicating this in the Senate who, for them, the internet is something, a lot of them, fairly new. Yeah. And they may not, I'm not maligning anyone's intelligence, but it's a highly sophisticated issue, and I'm not sure that they necessarily have an understanding. These guys
I don't think they did. And I think as of about 2 weeks ago, it looked like this thing was going to cruise right through and be passed, quite frankly, but the internet folks really organized, and this blackout on Wednesday they had was a very effective tool for them. And I got to say, I really do agree. I don't think the Congress really understands the internet a lot, and the copyright issues are horribly complex. But the makers and the takers, that is the music industry and the film industry, and the internet people and the websites, need to get together and come up with a set of protocols that they could live with, and then maybe go forward with legislation that would protect copyrights while also protecting people's right to stay open. As
so you're saying really those groups should get together and agree amongst themselves and then maybe go to Congress and say, like, this is something that we believe in. But I mean, if you look at iTunes, look, music piracy was running rampant until iTunes figured out how to make it cheap and legal.
Yeah.
And if you make the price point something that I think people are willing to do something legal if it's affordable. And if you make it unaffordable, they will pirate, and it's very difficult to enforce that. So where does the private sector inform the public sector here?
Well, I mean, it's certainly true. Innovation is great, and I mean, I use iTunes every day. But the one thing that's important is that I don't think it's going to work to get these two groups together, because on the technical side, a lot of these people, so-called in the name of free speech, a lot of it is hostility towards intellectual property rights as such. And so for them, the whole idea that people are going to try to ensure that others pay for their property, that is something that they fight tooth and nail. So for instance, the previous set of laws that we had governing intellectual property rights online, they oppose those with the same kind of claims about this is the death of the internet and the death of free speech. And so they're going to fight tooth and nail on
You also have an education issue here. My older brother is a composer and has a lot of friends in the composing community. There's a very well-known composer named Jason Robert Brown who has a lot of interesting things to say about this, because people will download his music for free.
Yeah.
They just download his music, and he should be paid his royalty, and that's his talent out there. And yet he posts very interesting stuff on his blog about it, because he'll get into dialogues with people who have downloaded his stuff, and the younger generation has no comprehension of intellectual property. They think it's there to be taken.
They think it's the intellectual commons, and that whatever appears on it, it is theirs. And we have this huge problem anyway globally right now, in that we are a creative nation. We create a tremendous amount of interesting stuff, films, books, all sorts of things, games, everything. And China, a lot of countries in Southeast Asia, the Mideast, Eastern Europe, they don't respect private rights, private copyright rights. And that's a real shame. It's costing us tens of billions of dollars. That is one area of enforcement that should be tightened up and that we should be working on very aggressively. But I also, unlike Don, I'm optimistic that you could get both sides of the industry together.
And I think with China, there's a carrot and a stick to be used in terms of their own enforcement of the piracy problem. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Interesting topic. For Don and Terry, I'm Allen Barton. You've been watching Front Page.